everyone, welcome back to Brookdale Farm. Well, today we're going to be doing a bit of a service on the old International C1300 1.5 ton truck that we recently got, and I just thought I'd take you through that process. I've got it sitting here idling at the moment just to warm it up a little bit and stir the oil up. I've driven it round a little bit to stir up the oil in the diffs and gearbox before we drain all of them. So once it's sat here for a minute and warmed up, we're going to drain all the fluids. We've got a bundle of new parts to go in, and I'll take you through the full process on how we service these. Now that it's run for a little while and got up to temperature, temperature gauge actually works on this. I overfilled the radiator a little bit this morning, so it's just pushed a little bit out the bottom, a little bit of water out the bottom as it's warmed up. First thing we're going to do is climb underneath here and drain the oil. Now, because this one's four-wheel drive, there's a bundle of stuff in the way. That means the oil's going to run everywhere except into our drain pan. Interestingly, I don't think this is standard, but it's got this big guard across the front of the steering link here to stop anything bending that when they're this was a fire truck, so they were going through some pretty rough terrain with it, and I'm guessing somebody's put this on just to stop it hitting rocks and stuff and bending, because it is sitting in front of the diff. So we're going to undo this, hopefully, and see just how nasty this oil in here looks. It's pretty black, but there's nothing too bad coming out of there. We're just going to let that drain for a bit, and we'll come back when it's finished draining. Okay, while we're waiting for the oil to drain, we're just going to change all the spark plugs. We've got new NGK BP4 spark plugs, which should be the right ones. They cross-reference to the old Champion number that is currently in there. When you're putting in new spark plugs, you always want to just check the gap on them. That on most vehicles that should be about 25 thou. Certain things they've got a much bigger gap. The Cadillac I think's got a 50 thou gap on them, but 25 is always a good starting point. I've left my feeler gauges down at work, so we're just going to eyeball these ones and set them as close as we can before we put them in. While we're round this side, one of the other important pieces of maintenance when doing a service is we just need to flick the distributor cap off. Now this really needs new cap and leads and points and everything in it. I had intended to set the points today, but I've left my feeler gauges down at work. So we'll leave the points, we'll have a look at them in a second, but one really important piece of maintenance, pull the rotor arm off, and underneath here there's a little felt pad. Now you're supposed to put some oil on that every time you do a service. This is quite important. This lubricates the vacuum or the advanced retard mechanism that's in the distributor. One of two things happens if you don't oil this. Either it seizes up and you have no advanced retard, or it wears really badly and this bit moves around, and then you can't set your points properly and you can't get your timing correct. That all looks pretty good and clean in there. I will grab my feeler gauges and set the points later on. We are on a budget, so we're not going to change all of that stuff in there this time. But once you've oiled that, it can all just go back together. While we're under the bonnet here with the oil can, it's a good idea just to put a bit of oil on these bonnet hinges, because they can seize up, and you can usually open your bonnet, but it makes it quite hard to close the bonnet again. So a little bit of that on each side just makes life easier in the future. Okay, the sump's had enough time to drain now, so we're going to put the sump plug back in. We're just going to grab a rag and clean up around where the plug goes in. There's still a tiny little bit dribbling out, but you've got to wait hours for that to all drain. Plug back in, give it a little bit of a wipe again, and do it up tight. Now this is our oil filter over here. We're going to change that next, but we undo that from the top. But we're just going to move our drain tray underneath that to catch all the oil that comes out when we open it up. Okay, so down here next to the distributor is the top of the oil filter. It's got this big bolt on top that we just need to undo. And this is a canister style filter, so this steel canister underneath is going to drop off when I undo this bolt. I'm going to put the camera down so that I've got enough hands to catch it and not drop it in the dirt. Okay, so this is the filter that came out of it, and it does have a part number written on here which has smudged off. Unfortunately, the new filter I got was the wrong one. They did their best to try and work out which one this truck should have, but they didn't get it right, so I'm going to have to take that back and take this canister in before I can get another filter for it. So I'm just going to whack this one back on for the moment, just so I don't get any dirt and stuff in the engine, and because I actually need to move the truck from where it's currently parked, and I'll whip this off and take it in when I'm next going down to town. We can now refill the engine oil as well. It looks like we really need to make up a new gasket to go on the bottom of the oil cap here. If you've got a manual for all of these sorts of things, it makes it a bit easier, because it will tell you roughly what the oil capacity is on here, so you know how much you've got to buy and roughly how much you should be putting in. I know that I drained out about 6 or 7 litres, so I've just put 5 in. It should take a couple more. So yeah, that's just on the low mark now. Now, even though we put the old filter back on, we did drain that, so we're going to need to put a little bit extra oil in to account for that. That is spot on the full mark there. This is the air cleaner off the truck. It's sitting upside down at the moment. The carby sucks through this area here. If we turn it the right way up, the air is drawn in through here, and this is what's called an oil bath air cleaner. So this one's also had some interesting repairs, probably done before they'd invented JB Weld. So anyway, this bottom section is full of oil, and there is always a mark on these that says oil level with a little arrow to exactly where the oil should be. So the air gets sucked down through here, through the oil in here, and then there's fibery stuff in here that just picks up any of the large parts of dirt that might have got through the oil. Mostly you can get these apart to clean them out, but once again, this has had a few repairs to it, and I don't think that it comes apart anymore. But yeah, it draws it up through there, in across there, and into the carburetor down there. So I'm going to fill this back up and we'll put it back on the engine. Now, this particular oil bath air cleaner is not designed particularly well, because there's a bolt on the bottom here that you need to do up to hold it all together. But when you turn the air cleaner upside down so you can see what you're doing, all the oil runs out. So don't do that. Luckily, when I took it off, it didn't have much in it, so I learnt that from when I pulled it apart and it was full of water. Then there's an annoying clip on here that's a little bit awkward to wriggle together. And the breather hose on this side here. And a bolt underneath that you can't quite see. While we're underneath the front here with our oil drain can, we might as well drain the front differential, which is here. The rear differential is going to be exactly the same. We'll drain that, but I probably won't show that on camera. There's a drain bung under here. That's got a 1/2 inch square drive, and that's quite tight. Oh. Okay, let's try that again with a bigger lever. Now, I'm going to need 2 hands for that. Well, I'm not sure who put this plug in, but they certainly didn't want it coming undone again. These actually are tapered plugs. That oil doesn't look too bad, actually. These actually are a tapered plug, and if you do them up too tight, you actually can crack your housings. So you want to be a bit careful that you're not doing them up too tight. I thought that oil would be absolutely disgusting, and I was a bit worried there might not actually be any oil in here at all. I could have left that in for another 5,000 miles. While we're in under here waiting for the gear or the front diff to drain, there's a couple of grease nipples here on the steering arm, and there's also one on front and back of each of the spring hangers. So I'm going to go through and grease all of the front end now. This is particularly, these ones are really important. It really helps to make your steering a little bit lighter. The rear springs on the truck also have one grease nipple at the front and two grease nipples at the back here on each side. There's also three grease nipples on the clutch. They're a bit hard to see, but there's one down here on this ball joint here, and one on either side of the bell housing down in there. The bell housing ones you can reach from underneath. This one here on this ball joint is a bit of a nuisance to get to from anywhere. Okay, so the diff under here has finished draining, so we can put this plug back in now. Because this oil in here was so clean, I'm tempted just to check the gearboxes for oil level and see what it looks like before I bother draining them. I'll put the camera down and do that up in just a second. Now the fill plug is up here. This is a level plug as well, so we just fill it till it starts dribbling out here. And we're going to fill that with an 80-90 oil. While we're doing our service, we also want to check the fan belt. Yes, it's still here, so that's good. No, this fan belt is worn out and I forgot to take it with me to get another one. So this definitely needs to be changed, but it's also far too loose, but you want to just push on it and there should be about an inch of movement up and down. So you just want to check that your belt's good. You also want to check your hoses. These ones aren't too bad on here actually. And the last thing we want to do while we're here is down here under the brake servo is the steering box. And if I can just get the camera in here, there is a bung on the top here. We want to take that out and just check the oil level in the steering box. This is something that often gets forgotten. There's the bung, sorry, I think you were out of frame before. This is something that often gets forgotten and makes a huge difference when they've got oil in and stops them wearing out so fast. So this is just a gear oil, the same as we're using in the diffs. If you've got anything heavier than that, you can also get liquid grease to put in them if they leak too badly. Okay, we're underneath the truck now. That's the front of the truck. You can see the engine up here, and this is the main gearbox here. Now, because they made almost identical trucks in two-wheel drive and four-wheel drive, they used a standard gearbox in both of them. So this is just a 4-speed with reverse gearbox. It's got a funny big plate on the back here with holes that aren't sort of for anything, and this funny bracket out the side here, which is for the handbrake when they are using a two-wheel drive, or used in a two-wheel drive. This truck, however, is a four-wheel drive, so we've got this little short tail shaft here, which goes back into the high-low range box and the four-wheel drive box. So this is the tail shaft that goes up to the front diff here. There's another, the handbrake is on the back of this one, and another tail shaft that goes back down to it. It's a bit of a cunning setup they've got here. This lever here is the high-low and two and four-wheel drive. This top pin here is high and low range. This bottom pin here, both of these slide in and out, is in and out of four-wheel drive. So because of the way the leverage is set up, when you move the lever in the cab, which slides this backwards and forwards, it's going to act on this one first, and then when this one's got to the end of the travel, it will operate on this one. So I'm not sure if I can move it from under here, but basically there's a big lever in the cab. It's in four-wheel drive at the moment, but in high range. When you pull the lever back, it pulls that bit forward, and that when that comes out it goes into low range. When you push the lever forward, first of all that's going to go into high range, then it's going to pivot on there and pull this one out, and that's going to go into two-wheel drive. Now we're going to check we've checked the oil in the back diff, and that was a bit gungy, so we did decide to change it in the end. We're going to check the oil in both of these gearboxes next. If we look at the front gearbox, we've got a drain bung here and a fill and level bung here. And if I just wriggle round to, I did find it, there it is. We've got a drain bung down here and a level bung here. So I'm going to check both of these. If I don't like the colour, I'll change it. Now the other thing that we have to do is each universal joint. There's two universal joints on each tail shaft and one spline shaft. So there's 3 grease nipples on every tail shaft. So that makes 9 grease nipples under here that we need to go through and grease as well. Now I was going to put some coolant in the radiator, but having fixed the major leak, I can see 2 other leaks. The water pump is leaking just a little bit, but also this rear seam on the radiator is leaking. It's got little pinholes all the way along here, so I'm going to have to fix them before I start putting coolant in here. This is all a cast iron block anyway, so although it's good to have a corrosion inhibitor in it, it's not essential. It'll be fine with just plain water in it for a little while. The last thing we've got to do is start it up, get the oil pressure up, and just come back and check the oil again. So once the engine's running, we just want to wait for the oil pressure to come up. This means it's filled the oil filter and everything, and then we're going to go and check turn it off and go and check the engine oil again. So the oil pressure's come up now. We can turn the engine off and go and recheck the oil level. Okay, so we just need to check the oil again. And yeah, we've just got to put a little bit more in. We're down on the low mark. I'll do that in a minute. And other than that, we're all done. Well, now we've got the old truck serviced and we know there's oil in all the spots that it should have oil. We've thrown an IBC on the back and we're just down at the bore filling it up again. So this truck can now go back to doing what it spent most of its life doing, and carting water around for us. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this little video. It's always a little bit challenging when you're running old machinery, and particularly when it's machinery that you've only recently got, trying to get all the right parts for it. So I'll have to go away and get that oil filter for it, and I can change that later. That's not a problem. It's just a little bit irritating when you've got to keep going back down to the shop. But yeah, I'll get a new oil filter and a new fan belt for it, and it should be good to go for the next little while. Anyway, thanks very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this little video, and I look forward to seeing you again next time. Bye!